Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's session, Going Offline with Resco for Salesforce. The objective of this session is to let Salesforce users know more about Salesforce, Resco for Salesforce, and how some of the features can be very useful for them. A little bit about me. My name is Okwe Okupwe, and I'm the founder of Necesidad, the Resco MVP 2023, with over 10 years experience working in the Salesforce ecosystem. Necesidad Consulting is a Salesforce partner, a registered Salesforce.org partner, as well as one of the exclusive Resco for Salesforce partners. And we focus specifically with nonprofits as well as SMEs. Our mission is to make a significant and positive impact in the organizations we serve, and we're quite proud of our excellent CSAT ratings. Just to say as we start that this call is being recorded and will be shared for the future. So I can see a few people are joining in, so I'll just admit more people in. Great. Just to repeat that this session is being recorded and will be made available for others who couldn't join or would like to review it later on. Great. I can see more people are joining, which is great. Okay. All right then, let's carry on. So today's agenda, we've done the introduction objective, and we'll look at the Resco for Salesforce features. We'll look at a demo and explore Woodford and other tools, and we'll have a session for Q&A. It's anticipated that this would take about 30 minutes, probably less, depending on the questions we have towards the end of the session. So to start, I would like to do a short poll. And how many have used Resco for Salesforce before? If you can please vote. If you have, yes or no, that'll be really useful. Thank you. We can see some responses coming in. Okay. It's interesting, actually pretty close, almost 50-50. All right. For those who haven't used Resco for Salesforce before, when you use Salesforce, what data do you use to capture, or what tools do you use to capture data offline? Again, this is very short. Okay, Excel. Okay, great. It looks like most people use Excel to capture data offline. Now, the other questions, or some non-integrated app, that is interesting. So I'll give people a few more minutes to respond, and we would look at some of these in a bit. Okay, so we've got a few responses, and that is fine. Okay. All right, so other questions is what tools people use digitally offline. The number of applications out there. And when people get asked what do they use to get the data into Salesforce, especially when they use Excel, it's pretty much using data loader. So what we tend to find is people tend to use pen and paper, probably send emails using Excel, and then they come across some challenges. They have to clean up the Excel spreadsheets, they find data missing or in the wrong format, and that presents a number of challenges. Now, the typical scenario, like we've seen, is Excel spreadsheets, challenges they have, and then they input that data, facing these errors with reconciling and fixing the issues. This tends to have an impact on the quality of the data, because then you have incomplete data, you have inaccurate data that isn't consistent, and then it makes it difficult to understand and analyze the data. It makes it hard to make meaningful references in those data. Also, where people are in the field, in the use case, let's say, for example, you've got a non-profit organization with field agents in the field, it's difficult to enforce procedures and evaluations, and time is just wasted trying to resolve all these things without a tool. A better scenario would be using Resco for Salesforce, and this allows users to be able to capture that data digitally whilst offline in a structured form. They can enforce data quality parameters, like making sure it's complete, it's accurate, it's consistent, using standardized formats, and it's timely. The beauty of it is that it seamlessly integrates with Salesforce, so you don't have to take any other steps to import or bring data in. And now you have a clean data, which helps you to make meaningful inference with reporting. In essence, it saves you time and money. It's time you'd have spent trying to fix the errors. You can actually spend that doing what you actually need to do. So the question then is, what is Resco for Salesforce? Resco for Salesforce is a mobile CRM application that seamlessly integrates with Salesforce, developed by Resco, and it allows Salesforce users who have no internet connection or interrupted internet connection or limited connections to be able to still interact with the Salesforce data whilst on the go. And users can perform numerous amount of tasks and activities. They can perform automation tasks and get the data back into Salesforce. So what are the key features for Resco for Salesforce? There's so many features, but we'll just go through a number of them very briefly. Like we said, it allows users to work offline. You can adapt the UI into different screens and formats. It seamlessly integrates with Salesforce and supports a wide number of languages. You can also use the translations to put in other languages that you think it did not support. Another beauty of it is that it uses Salesforce metadata. So you bring down all your Salesforce metadata, and this includes the objects, the fields, the record types, profiles, all of those things, and you can then amend and configure on top of that, as well as build declarative logic and so many other features, such as Resco inspections. You can generate PDF reports or Word reports that actually come back as attachments into the Salesforce record when you synchronize. And you've got a real-time sync dashboard that allows you to view how your users and their devices are being used, whether they have issues with synchronization, any warnings the admin should be aware of, or any just sync errors in general. It integrates well with DocuSign, and there is a Stripe integration currently in beta. Would hopefully get some news from Resco at some point when that gets released. Resco has been architectured to work on different platforms. You've got iOS, Android, and Windows. And the architecture looks something like this, where you have, on one side, you've got Salesforce. And that's where you install your managed package, and you go to Salesforce to create your questionnaires in that managed package. And then you've got Woodford. Woodford is a Resco Cloud web-based application where you would configure the actual app itself. And that will pull some of the Salesforce metadata, like the objects and other things. And then you've got your mobile device where you would download your Resco for Salesforce application, and you download the Woodford project onto that. And then the data goes between your mobile app and Salesforce. It doesn't go back to Resco Cloud. It's literally from your mobile app to Salesforce, and from Salesforce to your mobile app. So how does it work? Essentially, it's a two-part solution, which we'll look at in a bit more detail, where you've got Woodford Configurator to configure your application, and your chosen mobile device to interact and use that in your field. A question we tend to get is, so how do we set up Resco for Salesforce? And there are quite 5 easy steps you can use. And these steps are, 1, you get your Salesforce environment. It could be a production, it could be a sandbox, or a Salesforce trial or DevOrg. We recommend starting up with a Salesforce trial or DevOrg just to play around, to get familiarized with how you're going to use your solutions for your requirements. And then you log in. Once you've logged into your sandbox or your production, you would go to the URL, which is salesforce.resco.net, and that's for the production. You can then go to the Salesforce-test the Resco.net for the sandbox. And you'll be presented with a request to allow access from Woodford. And once you've allowed access, you can then connect to your Resco for Salesforce from here. Just fill out your details, and then you're actually in. And once you're in, you'll be presented with this customization and setup where you can access Woodford, the sync dashboards, and the mobile report editor. And we'll look at these in the demo, don't worry. And the last and final step is on your mobile device. You go to your Google Play Store, your App Store, and download the Resco mobile device. And then that's it. You're good to go. Pretty straightforward 5 steps. So now what I'd like to show you is some demonstration to look into Woodford, look into the sync dashboard, and look into the mobile reports as well as Resco inspections. So like I said, once you've connected your device and you've connected Salesforce to Resco for Salesforce in Woodford, you'll be presented with these customization setup. And when you access Woodford, this is what it looks like once you've accessed it. You can see the number of dialogues and things, and I'll explain briefly what you have on this real estate. At the very top is where you can create new projects, you can activate, deactivate, you can import, export, and there's other things which we'll talk about in subsequent webinars. But the key thing to be aware about is how do you pull data down from Salesforce into Woodford? And the way you do this is by clicking on this update button, and that will pull down all your metadata, and then you can access them. You can have a number of projects. In this example, I've got one for field service use case, and I've got one for a program management use case, which is a Salesforce nonprofit success pack program management module. On the left-hand side, you have various administrative settings, which you can go to configure your device, assign your licenses to your users, do translations for different languages, and so on. So let's go into the program management. Actually, before I do, just one thing to point out, you can have several projects for different Salesforce profiles. So what this means is in Salesforce, you have different licenses. You can have your community license, your standard license, your sysadmin. You can choose which profiles should access which project. And once the user just logs in on the device, it will detect the profile and initiate the respective project for them. So once we go into Woodford, there are a number of things you'd see. The very first thing is the home screen. Like I said, this is a use case for a nonprofit organization, and I've put some of the main Salesforce objects like the contact, the account, the program cohort as the home screen. You could modify that to whatever you feel the users need to go to first. And you've got a number of components here, including the design, where you can choose the scheme, the color scheme. So for example, if you wanted to change the look and feel of your application to represent your client or your organization's color scheme, you can choose that here. You can have specific languages for specific projects. Again, you can come in here and change the localization for the languages. And there's so many other features, and I'll skip these for the sake of time. But the key thing I wanted to point out was on the entities here. These are your Salesforce objects. In Woodford terms, are entities. And you can see I've got access to pretty much actually all my objects. There are quite a few of them. But I'll just go into the account for now. So once a admin user goes through an account, they can see a number of things. Down here, you have all the fields you have on your account, and you can choose the fields you want the users to interact with. More so, you can choose the kind of permissions they should have on the Woodford project itself. Now, this respects all the Salesforce settings you get already from your security parameters there. What you can do here is you can then make that less and more tighter, more restrictive. So for example, if a user doesn't have read access on Salesforce, they would not have read access in Resco. However, if a user had read, write, delete, but let's say you did not want them to delete, you can remove the ability to delete from here so that they only interact in the way you've prescribed. The other thing is you may want users to, let's say, just work with personal accounts or just work with households. You can filter the kind of accounts that come in by putting a sync filter, and that reduces the subset of data that actually gets synced for that object. And then you've got the show UI, and this is where you define the form, the page layout, the way the device looks when the user is interacting with this object. And you can look at number of forms, you can look at the views, list views, for example, or different charts. So let's just go into a form very briefly and see what that looks like. So the fields were enabled on that initial list I showed you are available here for you to choose, and you can just drag and drop and put them in here and apply different styles. Now, like I said, there's going to be a separate webinar that looks specifically into Woodford, but just to show you the key components on the very top here, which is the unload rules, the change rules, and save rules. This is where you give the instructions for how the application should behave when the user loads this form, does something, interacts with a certain field, or saves the record. You can tell it, for example, if it's a new record, make it have a prefix, and the user can just, admin user can come in here, put an if statement, and say if the entity is new, for example, equals true, then we can have the entity's account name have a prefix. Again, depends on your requirement. You can change that to whatever, but there's so many options you can do to give the instruction of what to happen when it's new, or when it's unloaded, or when it's changed or saved. So that's a whistle stop on the forms. And then you've got the views, which you can change. The view is the list view, and we'll have a look at this on the demo on the app itself. But this is how you show what should appear when a user is trying to find a specific record. Again, you can put a filter, and you can define several filters. So let's step away from Woodford for a bit and then go to the Sync dashboard. On the Sync dashboard, as I mentioned earlier, this is where you see the interactions between the devices and Salesforce. So if users are syncing, once they go into a place where they've got internet connection, if they had any issues or if they had any problems, you can actually see what those are. And it allows you to sync by date parameters. You can sync by searching for the respective user particularly, or the iOS. And here you've got charts. You can drill down into these charts to see more detail. And when you scroll down, you can have a timeline, and you can have the details of when the user synced. You can see I've done so many synchronizations, and you can see if there were issues or errors, and they would appear with an icon down here where you can see what the error was or if what the warning was. So that is a high-level whistle stop about the Sync dashboard. And then you have the mobile report designer. This is essentially where you design things like PDF documents. So a use case could be, and this is a real one, we had one of our customers. They were nonprofit organizations dealing with contact people in the field, and they wanted to take their picture, give them an ID reference, and print out something they could laminate, so it looks like an ID card. And once they filled out that information on the device, taking the picture, capturing it, saving it, they then run the report on the device and send that to a printer nearby, and then print it out. So this allows you to create PDF reports, documents, HTML documents, CSV documents, if you wanted to. And I wouldn't go into a lot of detail, and I'll just skip this and then show you the next thing, which is the questionnaire. Now, this is separate from the other ones. This allows you to configure questionnaires whilst you're inside Salesforce. The look and feel looks very similar to what you have on Woodford, but actually you can do all of this from within Salesforce. It's part of the Salesforce Manage package. As you can see, you've got the unload rules and the various actions you can configure. On the left-hand side here, you've got your navigation. You also have your components where you can add different types of questions, text, multi-text, single choice, and so much. And we'll have a look at this in more detail once we go into the demo on the app. Actually, let's just do that now so it brings this to life. So if I toggle to my mobile device, remember when we saw the home screen, we can see that we have the contacts, the accounts. This is what we have there, following the color scheme that I just showed you earlier. The user can go into their agenda and see what they have planned for today, or they can see that in a day view, a week view, or a month view. So if we went to an account, a contact, for example, we have a list view. And in this list view, the way it's been configured is you have the name, title, phone number, and email. If I go into Andy, for example, we can see we can actually capture information about Andy. We can change his name, for example, if maybe that was meant to be Andrew, and save. Or we can look into the related records at the bottom here. And as you can see, we've got inspections. So this is an example of the one I just showed you earlier, where we had the COVID-19 passport. In this example, we can see there were a few in progress, or a few completed, one in progress. And in here, we can actually fill out the questionnaire. If it's tested positive, say yes or no. Say yes, it was positive. You can see the color changes. We can have conditional formatting. And based on the answer that the user prescribes, you can then have a different question showing up. And at the end of this, once they're happy, they can submit. So we have a couple that have been submitted. And when they click on the report, they can have a PDF version, which can be, if they wanted to have, emailed to them or printed out to them. If we go into, I wouldn't save this for now. Let's go into our accounts. Similarly, you can see that we can interact with the account. We can filter the list view by name to find out who we're trying to interact with. Capture information. In here, we've got a number of buttons where we prescribe things to happen when the user clicks on this button. So this could navigate to a new page. It's got an enforcement saying this field must be filled. You can modify the behavior and have different things happen on this form as your requirement needs are. If we go into the bottom down here, I just want to show you, you've got a number of related list views, but also we've got mobile action at the top. So in this example, I created a separate PDF document, which just runs, and when we click on it, we can see more information here. Now you can create various forms. The use cases, other use cases we've seen are during assessments or maintenance. Let's say you're going to maintain a property and you're trying to give them a health and safety assessment report. At the end of it, users will then fill out the form, complete it, and then generate a report that can be sent to them via email or printed as a hard copy. So we've gone through some of these things relatively quickly, but hopefully it gives you an idea of the kind of things you can do with Resco for Salesforce. So at this point, I'll just go back to my presentation. And summarize some of the things we've looked at. So we've seen that we can use Resco for Salesforce to make it easier to capture data digitally. We've looked at some of the features, definitely not all of the features. We've looked at how to set up Resco in 5 simple steps. We've walked through Woodford, the sync dashboard, the mobile report editor, Resco inspections, and some of the things we can look at on the mobile app in itself. So at this point, the floor is open. All questions are welcome. So if you've got any questions, please raise your hand or type them in the chat, and we will try and respond to them as well. Any questions? Just checking the chat to see. Yes, there is a question. Okay, so I will. Right, Shaim, I got a question. Let me unmute you. How do I do that? Do you mind typing your question? Sorry, yes, that would be really helpful. Thank you. Oh, I've seen the button. All right, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Oh, great. Thank you. I just, I don't know if I missed it, but I just wanted to know if photos can be captured in Resco forms.
Yes, they can. So you can actually capture pictures, and I could choose a picture or capture or take a picture from the device in itself. Let's see if I can capture a picture of this screen.
Great. And while you're doing that, follow-up question is, how does that get stored in Salesforce? So does it get attached as a file, or do we have to configure something in Salesforce to bring that data in?
You don't have to configure anything. So once I've saved it, in this example, it thinks it's because I'm a person, it's put the person's picture there. Once we synchronize, that data just comes straight into Salesforce. So I'll show you that very quickly, actually. So if because I'm online now, synchronize, that should come back into Salesforce, and it comes as an attachment in Salesforce. You don't have to configure anything on top of that. Once you've added the fields, remember in Resco, we can choose different types of fields. It will just come in as an attachment. Same with the questionnaires, same with the reports, the one I showed you about the PDF reports. Once you save them on Resco, and next time you sync, it just comes in straight to Salesforce as a attachment.
What do you mean by questionnaires come in as attachment?
Great. So let me show you an example. So if we went to, I'll sync again, I'll show you both. If we went to the person, right, and they had this COVID report inspection. When the user goes into the report and they click on the save button, or if I went to the person, the organization, the accounts, and I went to this report and I run it, if I choose to then save it, it saves it as an attachment, so that when you sync and you go back to those records in Salesforce, you can then actually see them as attachments. So when this is synchronized, I will go to Salesforce, and then I'll refresh in Salesforce, and then you see those records there. So great. So if I go back into, well, you've got a couple of Andy's view here, but if I refresh both of these, so you can see down here, there are a couple of attachments. Today is the 20th, so that's the PDF one. And on Andy's record, actually, it should be there. I've not configured the related list view. You should have the attachment down here as well. I didn't put that list view there, but they would come straight into Salesforce. Yes, and you can have the pictures and the files come into Salesforce.
Okay, great. And if we wanted images to not be stored as attachments, but as actual image files and on a record, then we could configure the field for that and then push the data from Resco form to an image field.
Exactly, you can. So let's just go very briefly to some of the fields we have here. So you can have all your Salesforce fields. You can have a rich text fields, the ones that can actually save images. You can use that as an example, and that could be where if you wanted to, your files would be saved to. If you wanted it to be an attachment, you can have the attachments. If you wanted to use content document instead of attachment, you can use that and configure that as on the Resco side. Or if you wanted to use your attachment, you've got all the options within Salesforce. As you have it in Salesforce, you can do exactly the same thing on Resco.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Any more questions? Great. Well, in that case, the next steps, if you've got maybe a question that came to your mind later on, feel free to reach out to me. I would recommend that you do sign up for the Resco trial, have a play with it. And also, if you don't mind, kindly fill out this survey at the end. It would help us understand what we could do better in terms of our presentation, and whether there are a couple of things you thought worked out well or probably didn't work out well. We would welcome all your feedback. And if there's nothing else, I'd like to thank you for your time and your attention, and you should receive that link via email shortly. Thank you very much.